Welcome back, everybody. Musicom Academy. Here we go again with another lesson. This is number 2, the second lesson of about maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6. Until I actually do them, I'm not going to know how many there actually are. Where we go into hot clocks and categories really specifically. And I'm going to lead you in baby steps through that entire process. The first one was what we started with, which was time spent listening, which was last week's lesson, where, you get a really good sense of, boy, people don't listen a whole lot of time to the radio. The brunt of the audience, probably, in most stations, at least 80% of the audience is listening for a very short period of time per day, like under an hour for sure. Absolutely. Although there would be people who listen longer, obviously. And a lot of that started to occur as soon as PPM sort of kicked in, personal people meters, the little pagers that people carry. And it's automatically logging. There's no more thought. There's no more memory like diaries of what someone listened to. It is literally logging and hearing what the person is hearing and essentially writing down the time and the stations that they listen to. So that sort of kicked in earnest around 2009, 2010, depending on the market and depending on the country. And what that did, it caused a lot of ramifications. So what started to happen was, which is going to impact where we're going, as I do this lesson, it impacted how fast current lists, the current music, how fast a song would get on the chart, go up the chart, then come back down the chart and goodbye. It really slowed that process down a lot, super slowed it down. In the older years, 60s, 70s, and 80s, things moved way faster than, they do now. So that's going to be part of the lesson. So it slowed down current lists, and it also made categories actually get smaller and turn faster because you knew that people were listening for a very short period of time. So that's the brunt of where we lead up to this lesson as we start to get into categories and we start to get into hot clocks and things like that, and they are definitely intertwined. So let's get into it. Okay, as we move forward now into doing categories and also setting up hot clocks and things like that, I gave you an indication of, in the time spent listening, how long people are actually listening and what your target is. Like, your target isn't long hours, your target is a short amount of time. And I'm going to go through a few things with that after I show you something else, which is what Jeff Vidler was going through when he was talking about research and, the way research is typically done. And what comes out of the research is essentially this bell curve. And this is fairly, standard as the way things usually work out. I mean, it's been my experience that if we tested 500 songs in a music test, usually 150 of them weren't usable. Sometimes more. You look at the scores and you go, wow, I don't want to use those scores. They're kind of terrible. Because if you can watch this cursor here on the screen, what Jeff was saying was the high performers, the songs that really test really well, they're going to be about 16%, 14 to 16%, somewhere in there, okay? And the really horrible songs, ones what no one in the right mind would play, are also going to be roughly about 16%, and the rest sit in the middle. And I'm going to turn this into numbers in a second so you can get an idea of this, but I want you to look at this and stare at this for a second. Because if this was test scores and, when you were in high school or something, and this is like clearly right at the end here is 100, your grade is 100, this is your grade is 0. This is 50, right in the middle here where this peak is. So the question ends up becoming, when you start looking at songs that are somewhere, below 50, maybe none of these do you want to play, which would mean if you tested 500 songs and it worked out exactly like this, 250 of those 500 songs you're not going to play. But it usually doesn't work out this way exactly. This blue section here tends to sometimes be a little bit larger and maybe a little bit flatter or be a little bit lopsided. But for sure, somewhere around here, so let's just say if this is 16 for the horrible, you could double this up and go up to 32%, okay? So 32% would be somewhere around in here. You wouldn't want to be playing these. You can make a really large case for you don't want to be playing anything really. You score below 58, which is going to put you somewhere over by the 3 in this 34%. So now that we've got that out of the way and get an idea of this, I'm probably going to throw this up on the screen again just to remind you, but let's move to actual numbers. Let's say you tested 500 songs. This is how many songs are tested. And 16% is the best, which is going to be 80 songs. 16% are going to be the worst, which is 80 songs. And too weak to play is going to be 16%. Again, it's going to be another 80 songs. So now 80 and 80 is 160. So now you got 160 songs that you really don't want to play out of those 500 songs that are tested. And that looks like this. So you test 500 songs and you only get to play, in a perfect world, 340. And this is pretty close to that 150. I found that usually you test 500 to 150 aren't any good. Here's why. Because you've just lost 160 songs, which is what I've kind of found that usually happens. Now let's play a little bit farther onto this and take a look at these 80 songs that we have that are the best. Well, first off, when you test songs, a lot of the songs that test well are not going to be current. Okay, they're going to be, when I say current, within the last 3, 4, 5 years. Some of them will be, but a lot of them won't be. So what you're going to be faced with is you're going to try to do a recurrent category, and you're going to be pulling the recurrents, ideally, out of the absolute best songs that you have. So what's left here, 80 minus 20 recurrents, you have 60, which would be probably your power gold. Now, all of this may not be power gold because something might test really well, that when you stare at it, it might be sort of a novelty song that you don't really want to power a lot. So you might lose a few songs in here, but let's assume you can use all 60 of the remaining, out of those 80 songs for power gold. So this is where you are. You have 80 cream of the crop, 20 of them went into recurrence, and 60 of them, went into the power gold. But this is what's interesting. Over here, with 500 songs tested, you had 500. You couldn't play the really bad. You couldn't play the really weak. You were down to 340 songs. Now, let's take out the recurrence and power gold. Now your library is down to 260 songs out of that music test that are playable into some other category of some sort, which is not a lot of songs. This probably wouldn't be too bad at all, really, if you're playing a lot of currents. 75% of every hour is taken up with current songs. So, the 260 would be fine. If you're an AC station that's really leaning into gold, okay, this is going to be it's just going to be a small number. Now, let's just say you had a huge amount of money. Maybe your coast in Los Angeles. They actually test 1,000 songs. This is what this looks like. Here's the worst of the worst. Here's the too weak to play. Here is the best of the best. 1,000 minus the worst, and the too weak to play. You end up with 680 songs. Now over here you have the best songs that. The cream of the crop, that 16% that Jeff was talking about on research. In this thing here, this 16%, it's now 160 songs that you have to deal with. If we look at this 160 and say this is the cream of the crop, again, same thing, you're going to be pulling recurrence and power gold out of this 160. Now you got a pretty fair amount to choose from, which is great. But all of that being said, this is for 1,000 songs being tested. You just won't have the money to do 1,000 songs to test it. I mean, most stations will never have that. Yeah, I just threw out Coast in LA as a big station that I knew would have a lot of money because I think they usually almost always run number 1 or number 2 in the market. So therefore in Los Angeles, they're making huge amounts of dollars. Okay, even in bad times, they're making huge amounts of dollars. And therefore, one would assume that they have a lot of money to spend on research. So that's the only reason that I threw them out. But then I was sort of curious. It's like, because I don't like to say something on this course that, is wrong, or at least I can't back it up in some way with maybe my personal, in particular, beliefs or whatever. Anyway, so I actually literally taped Coast in LA for 7 straight days. Now, I'm taping it off the net, so I'm not there, and songs may have been playing in stop sets that if you were in LA, you'd hear the stop set and you wouldn't hear the song, and instead I'm hearing a song. But this is what sort of happened, and it was somewhat of a shocker to me, considering it's an AC radio station that really leans heavily into gold. For 7 straight days in July, Coast played 250 songs total. You know, separate songs, different songs. Some songs in that week, they would play them 12, 14 times in the week. A lot of songs when I started to look, because, you know, I'm matching them against the times, and there would be like a gold song, like say, you know, Heaven on Earth by Belinda Carlisle, which is not a new song. It's it's an old song. They play that thing every 5 hours, like every 5 hours for the entire 7 days. And you go like, wow, why is that? Well, a lot of that is what we're talking about in this lesson, and it certainly, you know, goes to the fact of smaller time spent listening. Therefore, you want to start to collapse your universe a little bit. That's the thinking. Whether that's 100% right is a whole different deal, and we'll go into that in ensuing lessons. But just to give you an idea of reality, 250 songs, Coast. #1 station in LA, AC radio station, 7 days, their entire universe. Again, maybe next week it would be a different 50 songs out of that is not out of the realm. That maybe the week I had them, the Belinda Carlisle, they were beating it to death. And then the week later, they just took it right out completely and put something else in its place, doing platooning, songs in and out, you know, week to week. Totally possible to do. It's a great thing to do, actually. It takes a lot of manpower, a lot of thinking, and you got to know what you're doing. But it's a good way to give the illusion of actually having a wider universe than you're actually playing. Because the core of that radio station might be, again, I don't know, I'm not there, but the core of the actual radio station might be 200 or 180 songs. Those are the ones that always get played. And then they're taking another 50 to 70, 75 songs, and every week they're replacing them. 75 new ones in, 75 out. 75 different ones in, 75 out. That type of stuff. Let's say you don't have any research, and maybe the only thing you have to go by is you're going to go by charts. So let's just say you're going to go by Billboard charts or media-based charts or whatever, okay? So this would probably be your train of thought. You're going to go, well, okay, I'm going to go back into the back years, 2020, 19, 18, blah, 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 so on and so forth, depending on your format, how far back you're going to go. So let's just say you're into 2020 and you go look at the charts and you think, well, here's the Billboard Hot 100. Well, if I go back there, there's going to be 50 to 100 songs there that I can play. Well, let me show you why that's not true. And usually the more current the radio station you are, the less songs you have available to you to play that make sense to be on your radio station, the farther back you get. And it sort of reverses if, let's just say you are a classic hit station or, I don't know, classic rock or whatever. I mean, when you, in the current years, you're maybe not going to be playing anything. And when you get back into the 80s and 70s, as you go way down the list, if this, you know, these years kept going, well, you'd be playing more because you would have said to yourself, let's just say it's a classic hit station. Let's just say, I'm making this up. It'll be different for every station, but you might just say, the brunt of what we play is from 1998 to 1983 or 1978. That's what we play. We don't play anything from 2005 or 2010 or even the year 2000. Okay? So, you know, and again, if you're a current station, that will probably incredibly reverse. So, but just watch this. Let me just show you something. Let's say that it's the first of the year and the year is, well, let's just say it's 2020. You're looking at the year 2020. If you were looking at current songs that you wanted to, you know, that became hits, would you want to play the song that came out in the year 2020 or any year for that matter, and, you know, it came charging up the charts, it was a strong song and then died at 15? Would you want to be playing that later on as a gold? Song number 15, that's as far as it got. Probably not, because actually just promotional push alone could have got it up there where the actual strength of the song might have been like 35, which would have been crap, okay? So sort of a pretty decent rule of thumb would be to say, yeah, I kind of only want to deal with top 10s, maybe top 10 or 11s, but let's just say top 10s. Okay, so in the first week of the year of 2020, we got the whole top 10. All right, so let's go through the year and let's sort of put together what would probably happen, okay, on a typical CHR, or for sure an AC, it's going to be even slower on an AC than what I'm about to do. But okay, so there's the top 10 on January 1st. Now the next week, there might be like no changes. It's still the same top 10. Well, let's say the week after that, one song changed. And the week after that, probably nothing. Nothing's probably changed. Maybe one would change again. Probably nothing. And maybe one would change. Maybe there's a bunch of strong songs like the Weeknd songs that stay there forever. And Ed Sheeran, they sit there for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. You might go 4 weeks in a row and make no changes, and then finally you move one out. So let's just do a couple changes for no weeks, and then boom. So let's just make this pattern just to see what it's going to come out. Okay, and here, let me just actually grab this and just start copying it in. Okay, just to speed this up. So there's there's 1, 2 blanks, 1, 2 blanks. Now we're up here, week number 27. 1, 2 blanks, and 1, 2 blanks. Okay, there we go. How many songs do we have? Well, we have 27 songs. Oh, wow. Okay, so you have 27 songs for the year 2020. But wait a minute. No, you actually don't have. Again, just to show you what happens where, reality is many times different than what you believe it to be. Okay? So on January 1st, the first week of 2020, there were 10 songs in the top 10. But in 2019, in December 25th, the week before that, how many were in there? And how many of these are different from there? Did you turn the entire list over? The entire top 10 changed for that 1 week? Probably not. Let's just say that, I don't know, let's be benevolent in this and say, well, we put in 2 new ones at the start of the year. Okay, and 8 of them were from the week before in 2019's top 100. Okay, well, what do we got here? We only have 19 songs. That's it. 19 songs for the whole year that actually fit that criteria, being in the top 10 and all that good stuff. Because of PPM and the current lists moving slower, as I just showed you, that actually hit the top 10, absolutely, if you go back into the 60s, if you're a classic hit station, 60s or 70s, 80s, and to a pretty decent degree, the 90s, if you go back into those years, those, top 10 lists are turning over a lot. You might get 2 songs new every single week in the top 10. So instead of having 20 songs, you might have 30. You might have 35. You might even go out to 40 for the year, which, I don't know. It's just a guess, but maybe that's why classic hit stations and classic rock stations do so well. It's because when they go back into the past years, they actually have sort of more hits to choose from, more hits to play, and therefore they can be less repetitive. I don't know. That's just a guess. But, simple math sort of leads me to that conclusion, but I don't know if it's right or wrong. So anyway, let's continue on. Let's round it up to 20 and just start adding them in here. 20 songs for 2020, and just take it down. It's adding at the top, by the way. 320. Okay. Let's keep going. 460. 580. All right. Well, okay. 1990. But in these years, if you're a current-based radio station, you're really lean current, you're not going to be playing all these songs from these years. If you are a gold-based station, like an AC that doesn't play a whole lot of currents, you're not going to be playing so many out of these years. It's going to be less. You're going to be way more choosy of what you're doing. You might play the 20 out of maybe the first 4, maybe out of here. But then when you get into here, you're going to be way more picky. Even if there were 25 songs per year, it wouldn't make much difference overall because many of those songs didn't age well. You look back and you go, ooh, I don't want to play that now. Point being, you're not going to get the 600. And even if you did get the 600, it's still only 600 songs. You're not at that 1,000 or 2,000 level. So, hopefully this makes it really, really clear to you from the math of it why, if you believe strongly because you're starting out, I'm going to have 2,000 songs in my playlist, you just don't want to be doing that unless you have some really super great, which could be done, don't get me wrong, it could be done, super awesome, mathematical, magical way of taking clumps of songs, platooning them in and out, in and out, a lot of work there. Maybe, you're bringing in 25 songs one week and getting rid of 25, that same 25 the next week, and you're bringing in another 25. You might have an entire universe of 600 songs. You could pull that off because the core of what your radio station actually is playing is maybe 400 or 450. That's the actual station, and then you're playing with the rest of them in and out in small increments. But you don't want to just throw in, hey, here's 2,000 songs, go nuts. Ooh, that's not so good. Well, that's about it for the lesson today. So I just want to show you, it's kind of a weird place
hey,
here.
Are you that radio guy? Yeah. Hey, do you know
who? Take two. Okay, that's about it for the lesson today. We're in the village.
Are you that radio guy?
Yeah.
Do you know Ryan Seacrest?
No, I don't.
Because you think you can...
All right, that's about it for the lesson today. We're in the villages.
Hey, are you that radio guy?
That's the kind of...
Do you know Ryan Seacrest?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you think you can get me an autograph?
I've seen him on TV. No, I don't know. No, I can't get you an autograph.
Okay.
This is a friend of mine. This is Frank. He lives in the villages, which is why we're here. And as I was mentioning, before I was so rudely interrupted, we've done this take like 4 times, and this one still is awful. So much for radio. Anyway, that's it until I got the wrong hand left. Anyway, that's it. Subscribe, hit the like button, ring, all that usual crap. And until the next lesson, with the opposite hand. See ya!